That brand's not a service or a product, it's a feeling.
Today we are speaking to an actual OG in the branding / design space. First person of color to win a Lurie's Design Award. Founding Grid Worldwide, SA's most awarded agency, key figure in rebranding.
I think it was our philosophy that got us through COVID. That was, for me, the catalyst for exponential growth.
The search of meaning is about creating that white space.
Got to think out the box. You've got to constantly be thinking out of the box.
Everything is done has been unconventional.
Trusted in other people.
If people join me on the bandwagon of doing this brave, mad, crazy shit,
We can build this beyond. We can create a philosophy of make it mean something.
if something is familiar and magical, then I've done our job.
Hey, welcome to the latest episode of the C.Cast. It's an absolute pleasure having you here today. Before we get into the next guest, I just want to give you a little bit of an idea of what this podcast is about. We are about connecting creativity and technology to uplift the African continent and connect the world to Africa. What we do is we chat to members of our communities. We give them a platform to share their story and to share how they are connecting Africa to the digital economy and the world to Africa. So before we get into this next guest, if you like our content, I just want to remind you to like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment down below about what you think about the conversation. If you want to get more involved in the community, you can also join the WhatsApp group by scanning the QR code. In this group, we'll be able to share opportunities, knowledge with you, and you'll be able to meet other like-minded people of the community. So yeah, we hope to see you in the group soon. Until then, let's get into the episode. We did a podcast episode not too long ago with Adam, and it was one of my favorite episodes. And since then, Adam's given me a little bit of a world, or a little bit of an insight into the world of Grid. And I remember distinctly coming here to the office for the first time where we were recording today and being taken to a room that was a boardroom filled with awards and accolades. And I remember thinking to myself, damn, this is quite an achievement. And then I related back to my story and the achievements that we've, overcome and are achieving now. And from our journey, it's been a really, so I'm also a founder. I started a digital marketing agency, JD Creations, 5 years ago. And I know that when you get to these achievements, it's not easy. But that's what makes it so sweet. So for us, we don't have any Lurie Awards. But next week, Pearl and I are going down to the SA Innovation Summit. Pearl's leaving Gauteng for the first time ever to now go to Cape Town. And for me, that's such a big achievement. And it means something to me. And the reason why it means something to me is because I know everything that went into making that happen. So when I see that wall of awards, the thing that I'm thinking about is what went into that to make that happen.
Wow. Firstly, there's a lot of other people behind those awards and all those years of success. Great people, great minds, great clients. But I think the most important thing is that the foundation of allowing those great minds to have the freedom to create. I mean, the idea of creation is when you create something out of nothing, it's a massive achievement, right? So before you create something, there's a blank piece of paper. And when you give that blank piece of paper value, that's achievement in itself, right? So, I think when you look at those years of awards and accolades, they almost don't exist anymore because you got into the next thing. But what is nice about that there is that there's a recognition of knowing that something you've done had some meaning or had some purpose for someone to recognize it. So I think they're great awards and accolades, but you're back into how you win those things and why you win those things. And then we'll come back into, and you mentioned the idea of meaning. And when that young person that works for you has got to go down and fetch something that feels like they've been rewarded for, it gives you a sense of feeling, right? So I always go that feeling is very close to meaning in that it has a great human emotion. And great human emotions come from a deep sense of knowing self, right? So I know it's getting a bit deep, but the fact is that meaning is deep. And value, when you give something value, is because it's got meaning. And people seek meaning all the time. You know, I personally, when I go through Netflix, I look for the documentaries because I kind of believe in facts and truths more than I believe in kind of made up stories. And same as people. People today are so jaded by the fact that there's so many things could be fake, but even though they're true. So we like things that have absolute meaning because we believe they have factual understanding or there's some truths to them.
That's amazing. I like what you mentioned about having a blank page, because when we do these podcasts, we normally go back to the beginning. And I want to go to Nate as a blank page. Like, where did that start? Because did young Nate know that he was going to have a wall full of all these awards? Was that a part of the plan? Like, what did that blank page, where did it start?
Yeah, funny enough, you know, like there's I only learned this later on in life. Like when you're a kid, there's a thing called vasana, which is your inherent nature. So in the ancient Indian philosophy, they used to put kids and watch them. They could see what they were prone to. You know, you're either scientifically prone, or you're very logically prone, or you're very creatively prone. But I was very, very inquisitive as a kid. Like, you know, when I was in school, when obviously my teacher came to me, says like, you know, where did you get that from? And I was also like, I read a lot and I wanted to know more. And the more I got to know more, the more I felt fascinated by the idea of creativity, because it was a little bit of an intangible where everything was quite tangible. And I liked this fantasy world of creation. And then I read a book, it was called The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand. And in there, the hero in the book is an architect, but his fight between logic and magic is consistent in the book. Sure. And the idea of where creativity is the magic and logic is this world we live in terms of trying to be quite rational, he finds solace in the idea of chaos, in this madness of imaginative worlds, of making something amazing. And his constant fight between these two worlds is about creativity winning. And there's a tangible aspect to creativity winning because it stands out. And I kind of stuck to me for a while that I wanted to be an architect then, because I realized putting up these amazing structures, having influences from different eras was far more a thing I wanted to do than I wanted to do be an engineer. So that's where creativity to me started in terms of its inquisitivity. And I said to you, I didn't realize that I was in a bus once with my mates of mine. I was in standard 9 or standard 10. And I said, what do you do? And he says, listen, I'm doing graphic design. I said, yet, what is graphic design? And he was like, don't you know what graphic design is? I said, no. He says, listen, the college is having open day. You know, you can come have a look. So the few days before that, I went to the library reading everything about graphic design. I'm like, shit, this sounds interesting. You know, and it was 3 years and not 7 years like architecture. And that's how I started my career in design.
Sure. And I always get fascinated by this concept of curiosity. And we spoke about it as well on our podcast, because that thing of being motivated to go and read and discover new things is a very unique thing that not everyone has. And I always get fascinated by the idea of, where does curiosity come from? I don't know if you have an answer to that.
Well, again, you know, when we go back to meaning, curiosity is a thing that in search of meaning is always trying to scratch the surface to see if there's something more to something. And a lot of the times when there is more to something, you want to dig deeper. And the more you discover, it's like archaeology, the better you feel, right? Because there's always a backstory. There's always a origination of something. And over a period of time, something catches into a real understanding of what is that story. So to me, curiosity, if you want to find out about the stars, you want to know how the stars got there. You know, you want to work out why that tree grows in that way. You want to work out why that fruit falls at that time of the year. All these things are about the curiosity of the mind. So in search of meaning is the fact that you got to understand those little connections for you to understand life in its essence.
For sure. And that curiosity, like, was there something within you that sparked that? Maybe Was there a person or
Well, that's what I'd say to you.
experience?
The thing about the story about Vasana, again, I'm talking about inherent nature. So the thing about meaning is sometimes is that kids, every one of them is different, right? And they all have their inherent nature. But if you at an early age can pick up what that nature is and guide them into a specific path, they will grow into it. But if you confuse them, they get a bit like what is my real purpose? So a meaning and purpose and feelings of all those things are kind of aligned in a way. Like we always say, the universe has kind of got certain things stacked out for you, right? And sometimes you take the long road, and sometimes it's not the long road because you're kind of more in tune with who you are. So this idea of in search of who you are as a person starts at quite an early age. The sooner you realize the kind of purpose and the meaning of where you should be, the easier things become, right? So the idea of saying, how do you know that you want to be a creative? How do you know is that these things they're probably there, but sometimes it takes us a long time to get to it. But when you really go, like when I say I was inquisitive, I knew I didn't want to be an accountant. I knew I didn't want to be an engineer. I just found it didn't excite me, right? So you got to kind of watch these youngsters and work on what excites them. So in the world today, I mean, there's a lot of people, looking for jobs, and we even say there are jobs that are not even created yet for people coming. It's because we can't kind of pigeonhole people and put them into certain things. You just got to allow them to explore their way of how they like to approach life. And then life in itself is about a certain way of how you make a living, right? So whatever you choose in terms of a runway to kind of succeed as a career has to have some feeling of you loving what you're doing. So that has got to come from some place too. We're all different. Like, I mean, Adam and me, Adam's got a very different approach to how he looks at things, but he's found his niche, and when I watch him and I just watch him from afar, I can see how he pulls different things together. Although he's got a creative process, it's different to mine. But yet, he's found his niche.
That's also why I want to find out more about, like, you mentioned something now that's sticking with me, and it's that everyone has that innate child within them, but they need to be guided. Yeah. Was there someone that guided you?
Again, I wish, like, I've never had a dad, right? My mom used to work quite early, leave home early, she was out of the house like 4, 5 o'clock, come back at 6, looked after those 3 sisters and myself. So again, those circumstances kind of helped me grow up very quickly, right? So I wouldn't change that for, oh my God, I didn't have a dad, so you must have had it bad. I suppose I had it bad, but I also had it good because I had to make some quick decisions quite quickly. I started a very early car wash when I was 12 years old. I started a cigarette business, a bottle business. So, I kind of connected my own dots. And if I do it all over again, those things have taught me amazing lessons.
I love that answer. And you've probably seen me here with a big grin on my face. And the reason why is because I can relate to it so deeply. My dad passed away when I was 12.
Oh, okay. Sure.
So I grew up in a very similar situation. And it's funny because people say sorry when I tell them.
Yeah, I know.
But it's like some people have someone that guides them or a person.
Yes.
But in your instance, what I'm hearing is that it was the situation.
Completely.
Which is what guided you.
Yeah.
And I can relate to that so deeply because a lot of people will see that storm as a thing that kind of causes chaos in your life, not realizing that chaos actually can guide you to the other side 100%. Of that storm. And there's light there.
To me personally, if I go, I've always looked after myself. So even in the decision-making process, I'm not waiting for someone to make a decision. It's allowed me to go, if I don't make a decision, something will have consequences to the fact that you're not making a decision. Yeah. So it's kind of helped the process of leadership in a way also, for myself personally at the moment. Now we have great leaders in the business, and they make all the decisions.
Yes. I'm so keen to tap into that because one of the challenges that I'm experiencing along this journey, being so independent, is growing that team and being able to trust other people. Did you ever have a situation where now you started the business Maybe before we even get there, how did Grid start? What is the essence of that? What is the seed of that?
Again, I think there was always a rebellion in me, in a way. I don't know what it was, right? I think I lost it in my first job. It was good foundational for 3 years. I was at FCB, Lindsay Smithers. And there was good foundation. I worked with a guy called Ian Becker. And, very quickly I had a lot of responsibilities. And that was the first year, I think I won my first design Lurie. And then I was sitting in the Luries, I remember, and it was in Sun City and everyone was downstairs and I was sitting in the gallery in the auditorium and they called my name, I had to go to stage. I was wondering, how do I get to the stage? Because I was sitting in this balcony and all these fancy tables, so someone had to come and usher me down. I had to walk through the entire Luries and all these people were clapping and it was an amazing feeling. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I can still remember it like it was yesterday. But it was my first time I won Luries and I was like, yo, this is mad, like this big city, Johannesburg, and I've been 2 years in it, and obviously then Hunter Scorus. I mean, the guys called me there, and I went to see the guys at Hunter Scorus, and then they said, listen, you can help us run our design studio there, and I started there for a little while, and I was, again, when I say a rebellion, there was one or two people there where I found I couldn't work because it wasn't allowing me to be myself, and where I came from, I was like myself. And eventually I went across the road from Atlas Coras and there was an agency called AMC. And that's where I met my partner, Louis Gavin, which was for a while he was. And then Clinton, who actually works here, was working at the agency. And from there, we had quite a successful agency. Louis and the guys did the first ANC election. It was 1993. And it was like a real buzz. And there was an amazing people around me. And then, from there, we grew quite a lot in that business. We took that business into an amazing place, and then DDB Worldwide came around and we won our own agency here, and they said, why don't we make this agency AMC DDB? So they've made a few agencies come together and created DDB South Africa, which was our first leadership part. Then we had a bit of a fallout with the leadership there, and we started our own agency called TBWA Gavin Reddy. It was actually called Gavin Reddy Horn, but the horn went away and it was just Gavin Reddy. And that went for about 10 years, Gavin Reddy, TBL Gavin Reddy. And then after that, I've obviously also exhausted that period because I wanted to do more specialized into design. That's how Grid started, actually. It was Gavin Reddy Identity. That's what that word means. I wish it had a far deeper meaning. I mean, the idea of Grid is, as a foundation of anything great, has a grid. But we can post-rationalize that, but that wasn't the really thing. It was actually Gavin Reddy Identity. And then we started this, I went and started this thing called Grid in Melrose Arch. Okay. And that's how Grid was born in 2005, end 2005, kind of beginning 2006. Yeah. So 2025, 2026 will be 20 years.
Sure. And I think, just relating it back to growing up, raising yourself a lot of the time. With that, you have a lot of agency, right? Excuse the pun, right? Yeah. But with that agency, it kind of gives you freedom. Personally, I think that's also probably why I've never worked a 9 to 5, because of that fear of I don't want to be boxed in.
Yeah.
So anyways, when it comes to that thing of agency, do you feel like there was something, do you think that's kind of what pushed you to start your own thing, was to get a little bit more of that freedom?
Again, when you have I don't know what it is. It's an internal fire of rebellion, right? So sometimes, I never took authority well. Not that I was trying to be just, an anarchist for the sake of being an anarchist. I think I just didn't take authority well. But the fact is, I always felt like this Lone Ranger. And I kind of, in my mind, kind of shaped a certain way I wanted to go. Right, and if people join me on the bandwagon of doing this kind of brave, mad, crazy shit, I kind of went, okay, I'm feeling good about it. But when I felt stifled, I felt trapped, I wanted to get out. So eventually I realized, shit, I've got to do this by myself. And then that's why I actually went on my own. It was a brave move. I had no clients. It was a little bit of on a cold, where I said, let me just start this thing. Obviously I had a lot of background and a lot of, knowledge in the industry and things like that. But It was quite lonely out there when you first started.
Did you ever feel like a sense of imposter syndrome? Because a lot of people like comfort. And in order to do great things, it's always going to seem crazy until it's done. So that thing of, having that agency, it kind of gives you a freedom to do crazy things, because if you're doing it by yourself, you don't really have to convince or get the approval from anyone else, right? So a lot of people, they get into these positions, someone who's also one literally first person of color, right? Who probably not, one of the only people that's willing to jump off the bridge in this agency, which is making the leadership, I'm sure, quite uncomfortable. Did you ever have a sense of imposter syndrome, feeling that sense of being a lone ranger?
Again, I think the humanity in me is always about, I care about the next person, right? It's not like, I'm just kind of break everything in front of me and I want to get there stuff. But there was things where, it was quite frustrating in the sense that if you look at the so-called traditional ad world and stuff like that, it comes with a lot of baggage, and it comes with a lot of old school mentalities and a lot of different ways of how people operate, right? And then sometimes you just want to get there. And the more I learned about it, the more I learned, listen, I was a little bit of a hothead when I was, doing this thing by myself. A lot has changed in terms of the finessing of character, understanding the other person's view more, but up front, that rebellion and that craziness did initiate this kind of attitude, which kind of still lingers in grid today, in terms of everyone feels that they can do anything they believe they want to. Like if you look at our leadership, and Adam will touch on it, they all have their own leadership styles, they all have their own way of working, and I think that's what we want this mini rebellion in a way that feels that it can still be harmonious and still be encompassing of humanity. Not that rebellion is this thing that is an anarchy towards humanity. So that balance between humanity and anarchy and rebellion is quite fit of Grid's style. That's why all the leaderships in Grid are interesting people. They got their own drive, they got their own personality, there's a curiosity in their life, and I love that. I don't want anyone to be like me. I think everyone is their own people and their own person, and that's what makes the magic of this place.
Variety is the spice of life, right?
No, completely.
Yeah. So when it comes to that thing of being a rebel, was there ever a time when you went too far?
Yeah, lots of times. I mean, we're doing a book at the moment. It's called The Book of Meaning, and it's 20 years of Grid. And the other day we went through a whole brainstorm into trying to get the originations of the persona, of understanding. And the more we went into understanding what this was, the more further we went away from what this should be. And we came back and restarted and said, think of someone reading this book 20 years' time. They don't want to know about your agency. They want to know about your philosophy, right? So what will linger on and what's the legacy is the attitude you had, not, oh, look at the work we did, right? So we kind of rewrote the understanding of the Book of Meaning, not from, oh, this is our agency, what we did for 20 years. No, we kind of went, hey, Adam, what would Kai do when he reads this book in 10, 20 years? Right? I love what my dad did, right? So it's that kind of way of, how we showcase or kind of contextualize what we do, because there is a sincerity in terms of creating something out of nothing.
I want to know the challenges, because as you're speaking, I'm hearing all the fruits of those challenges. But there's someone listening to this that's hearing the fruits of it, that's going through a storm. And I know that all of these fruits came from something. Is there anything that comes to mind when I mention that?
Yeah, I mean, anyone out there in terms of, we actually tried to solve a problem, right? There's always a financial, economic understanding of what you're trying to do. People don't give you millions of rands to go and play and be all emotional about how your world operates. They do it for the populace, right? So populist ideas or how people consume things today means it needs to resonate, it needs to connect, right? I don't buy a service from you, I buy an emotion from you, right? So our clients, the reason why the audience, the end user loves who they are, like our F&B client now, it's the second year, the most valuable brand. Now, when you say the most valuable brand, what makes a brand valuable is that it fills a need in someone's life. If they weren't there, there would be a dark hole. But if that brand's not a service or a product, it's a feeling. That's why I like you, right? So, we say some of the greatest brands in the world, they don't sell you a product, they sell you a feeling. Now, for us to understand what that feeling is, we have to understand ourselves and we have to understand our audience. So when you're solving problems, you're solving human problems, right? And via your brand. So to me, anyone out there, work out if you understand your audience. They buy from you because you understand them, not because they want you to understand you, right? So they need to be understood. An audience needs to be understood. So when you out there in terms of the creative work and you're doing work for your end audience, it's very important that you connect with them on such a deep level. That will make them feel that you get them, right? So in terms of the process we go through to solve problems, we have to understand what we're solving for first. You can't just be creative and magical and imaginary for the sake of being all of that. I got to go, what is the need we are working with here? Why do I feel that I get what I need to solve? So that process of solving that need, and you can do it in the most breakthrough creative, you can do it in the most imaginative way, but provided you have an idea that has got a human connection. So any creative out there, anyone's trying to work out what is that process is the human insight, right? You come up with ideas that hit the neck, will hit the thing bang in the middle, and you go, I understand that person. So it's not easy. I can tell you right now, we're going through processes and understanding, the idea. We always say we start with strategy, and strategy is quite a toxic word. It's a heavy loaded word. But let's say that word was about trying to work out what the problem is and trying to get it into a space that is easily digestible in terms of a creative taking it and flying with it, right? So the idea is work out in the client's mind, like, what are you solving? Like, what is the need here that nobody could have found out? We always go back to that, right? And there's such parity products in the marketplace. Everyone's selling you this and this and that and that. What makes this special? What makes it special is that if you give it meaning, if you give it resonance, and you give it the understanding that I get why that person likes that, right? And then, those are building blocks into a long process. There's so many things that gets added to the end product. Adam will talk to you about the luxury marble circus. That's a blank piece of paper, right? Most of our brands we've created weren't there before. Obviously, it's not just us, it's the vision by the client that has the attitude and has the bravery to believe in what we want to do, right? Together, there's that amazing trust. And that trust comes from, I see these guys process. They're not just giving me superficial cut, paint by numbers stuff. They're digging deep to find out lots of stuff. And that digging stuff is where the meaning comes from.
When I think of grid, right, the thing that makes grid special is that philosophy that you're talking about. And that comes from you. So where did you learn that?
Firstly, I must say, it's not just me, right? I've got a certain attitude and a certain way of being. And, we have quite a extensive leadership team at Grid, right? And all of them have got the freedom of that way of thinking, right? So the success of Grid in all those years, it's not just me. It's got to do a lot of amazing young minds or some of the OGs you want to say. But the freedom of allowing people to be and getting the best out of them. You know, to me over here, sometimes we get a bit hot-headed and we even speak to each other and we go, listen, don't show your anger, you know, show your lift of somebody. And there's a philosophy here where we strongly believe in people. We really look after minds. We look after, even if people have egos, we kind of nurture those egos in the right way. We are very people focused. You know, again, as I said to you, if you don't connect with yourself, you're not going to connect with anyone. So we foster this understanding of team play, of leadership, of high performance, but comes with a lot of nurturing, right? There's a lot of nurturing in our leadership team that obviously, you know, if we've got 100 people, we've got 20 people in leadership, and almost each person has 5 people to look after. So, you know, when it comes down to narrowing it down to looking after the next level, the next layers, it's quite easy translatable in terms of how we want this culture to operate. And culture is something that we really strongly believe in at Grid. You know, there's nothing no money can buy culture, right? No matter how much you throw at it, if you don't inherently have it, you'll never have it. So, you know, it's the things that we do in between that create the culture, right? And the stuff we care about that creates the culture. And care is a very important part of our philosophy of meaning. Because if you care and nurture your talent, if you understand where they're going, if you can quickly work it out if they're not having a good day or having a great day, all those things become checks and balances in terms of fostering a culture that allows you to do the work we do.
Hey, hold on. I just need to remind you very quickly to like, share, and subscribe, and leave a comment down below about what you think about this episode. We need to be able to tell the algorithm on YouTube that we are creating content that is valuable. So please engage with this content, whether you're listening to it on YouTube or on Spotify or whatever platform, please engage. It just helps us reach more people, brings more people into the community, which means more access to knowledge and opportunities for you, a member of the community. So please don't forget to engage on this video or this audio podcast and leave a like, comment, or subscribe and give it a share. Thank you so much. We'll hop back into the episode. As you're speaking, I get a sense that there's a lot of an outward focus with the way that you think. It's a lot about the team, it's a lot about the clients. But as you said, it starts within, right? Where did that come from? Like, how did you learn that?
And again, you know, that's why I'm so important. I keep on going back to, you know, circumstantially, there's the reason of who you are as a person. The idea of meaning actually is to work out who you are. All the things that make you today, like, I've obviously grown and evolved a hell of a lot as a person, but to any young person out there, work out some of your instinctiveness of who you are. Because your instincts will tell you who you are quite early in the process. How you approach problems, how you approach kind of, you know, everyday life in terms of things that come to you or come against you. You know, it's an approach to things that allow for a holistic person to understand how to handle things, right? And that's taken a time. I have to be honest with you. It's not like it happened yesterday. You know, I'm probably the best I've been in terms of body, mind, and spirit at the moment, based on, I don't call it age, but it's taken a long time to get there. But the inherent nature of inquisitiveness, the inherent nature of wanting to know more, the discovery of knowing more is the more you understand people, the more you understand the world, the better you become holistically, right? So the originations, and I say inherent nature is the starting point of meaning, right? Is to discover who you are really early on. That will help you later on to work out, damn, I overreacted or underreacted, or I didn't dig deep enough, right? So those are all in control. They're not like things that are out of your control. So those are learning points for anyone out there. Sometimes people want to fast track or springboard so quickly into somebody else's world, and they haven't paid their school fees for those other things. So to me, it's like these learnings, but work out quick upfront as to those little bits and pieces.
Yeah, and it's better to fail when no one's watching. Like, we had a producer come on, his name's Bubele Boy, and we're talking about producing music. We've had quite a few musicians come on board, which has been an interesting conversation. And they always talk about how when they started making music, so I always asked them about their first song compared to the songs that they make today. And the beauty about starting small is that you have room to fail. Like, you don't want to go and make your first song in front of an audience of 1 million people, because chances are it's probably going to be shit. And if you make it in front of 1 million people, there's going to be 1 million people watching you make that fail, right?
Yeah.
So it's important to go through those failures and also be humble with where you are at, your current position. So now, we mentioned like growth and pushing the boundaries. And you've mentioned a lot of the lessons that you've learned. Could you give us a story or an example of one of the failures that you had to go through to learn one of these lessons?
Just like, some of the failures, I mean, I think one or two of my shortcomings was my temper and my, what was the word? I would say I was... Passion? It wasn't even that. It's like I never thought things through. I was always shooting from the hip. And like, if I go right back, I kind of survived a lot by doing that, right? But the more I learn about people, the more I learn about how the equilibrium in the universe operates, the more I realize I need to listen more than I need to actually react, right? And some of my shortcomings were, screaming at clients or screaming at one or two creatives and, at the early age. And I don't regret some of that stuff because, if I'm in the situation I am right now, I probably would never have handled the way I did. But saying that again, there's no regrets, right? I take all the scars and all that stuff that's brought me to where it is now. But those are some of the shortcomings from me in terms of, losing your temper quickly, being short with people, the idea of not fully seeing things through, Now when you look back, you have a balanced view of things. Like then I didn't have an aerial view of things. I was quite reacting on the spur of the moment. Those were some of my real shortcomings, and it's scarred me a lot because I've done stupid things based on that.
Yeah, for sure. And with entrepreneurship, I always say it's like a roller coaster. Yeah. One day at the top and the next day at the bottom, and you're going through the absolute most. Yeah. And I know those parts when it goes down, in order to go back up again, there has to be a driving force that pushes you to do that. Go ahead. I can see you ready to hop in on this roller coaster.
Driving force for me, again, is that, I don't rest on something in the past. I go, what is next? Yeah. And it's always been the drive. It's like, Adam calls me the youngest millennial, but it's that kind of youthful approach to not giving a shit sometimes, right? About any consequences and no fear, but just diving in and working. I don't give a shit. I'm just going to go. I don't know where that relentlessness or that kind of bravery comes from, but it comes from somewhere. And as I said to you, it's like that shock factor of being that kind of lonely person or that person that's been a loner, right? It just kind of, trek your own path. Yeah. Like, there's no like, oh my God, it's premeditated. I need to get there by then to do that. And that's what's the beauty of grit, I think, is that it's charted so many different levels of change based on the fact that we were prepared for it. It's not like, oh, that's happening, what we're going to do now. I think almost before things have happened, we've moved on, right? And it's only because we encompass this big philosophy of, not putting things in boxes. We kind of charter our own way in terms of, I believe, a brand. I'm talking now what we do. So I'm not talking about life, more about like we believe brands need to be going there. Like nobody goes and says, shit, that feels like a nice ad, or that feels like a great direct mail, or that feels like an unbelievable social media post. The other guy, I like it, I don't like it, right? So we are the curators of that. You know, the understanding of being hypersensitive about craft and how things become like a thumb stopper. You know, why do I stop on that? What have you done from an emotion point of view that allowed me to stop here? Right? Now imagine if I premeditated that you're going to stop there. I mean, how much of fortitude in terms of I need to have to make you do that, right?
You can't even comprehend all of that, because the reality of things is that there's so many variables out there that it's impossible for a human mind to crunch all of those numbers and make sense of it. Completely. Which is why you have to rely on your subconscious gut feel about things, because our brains, I believe, our brains are a lot more powerful than what we believe them to be. And the reason why we underestimate the power of our brains is because subconsciously there's so much more going on than we are aware of. We're only aware of our conscious mind, whereas subconsciously there's so much more happening that we can't comprehend. So, and that's why that feeling that you have in your stomach is so important, is because it's the culmination of all those things that are happening in the back of the mind that aren't at the forefront. And that's where I think feeling is
well,
so
that's
important.
The thing about, you know, like when I say feeling is highly connected to meaning, right?
Yes.
Is because, again, if I've got to be so kind of aware of what is going to make someone stop.
Yeah.
Right? So now to premeditate that understanding and create for that, right? You've got to understand where you're living in the world, right?
Yeah.
And it ain't easy, right? So we are faced with that every day.
Yeah.
Because there's so many our luxury marble circus, there's so many events happening every week.
Yeah.
Right? How do I make this thing special? Yeah. Why is it special? What are the different things you brought together into this ingredient that makes it different, that makes it this white space? Now, the search of meaning is about that. It's about creating that white space that no one, yes, you have a familiarity with something, but you've not seen it like this, right? So people always go, familiarity is a beautiful thing, because if it's not familiar, I move on. But if something is familiar and magical, and familiar and stand out, right? And it's premeditated, made you stop, right? Then I've done our job.
Yeah, that's what I love about the concept of nostalgia, because it relates to some innate memory or something that makes you feel something, right? But also when it comes to that thing of feeling, right? I don't know, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but what we try to do within our organization is, if you're creating something, make sure that you feel something when you're making that, because that's the best way to start.
Completely.
You can't predict how someone else is going to think or feel, but you can understand that feeling within yourself. Is that the right way to do it? Or
again, as I said to you, you know, the forces of what makes something magical is quite a few things. Like I could look at something and go, it's missing something. I don't know where it comes from. It's the art of editing and knowing that that's going to make it or break it, right? And, you know, sometimes I don't know what the ingredients is in yourself to work that out, but you know there's so many things happening, you know, like the idea of copy, art direction, the understanding of all the disciplines of craft to come together to make something to go, I get it. Now, we live in a brand world. We don't live in a fine art world, right? Yet, we need to have a lot of principles of fine art in our so-called commercial art world, where we've got to bring all those nuances. You know, the other day I was at the F&B art fair and just looking at the work, and it's amazing how, you know, fine art feels so fresh because it's a single person's perspective on things. And it's like poetry, right? So it's quite individualistic and it's quite niched. But when you are preparing work for the populace, which is the mass, you've got to kind of hone into a single emotion where a lot of people have got to like something, right? So it's easy to do something for very few people to like. but to get mass emotion. And the populace is mass emotion, right? And you have to understand meaning and feeling to understand the populace. And the populace, majority of them will laugh at the same thing or cry at the same thing. Like if you look at Hollywood, they make those movies so well. They know you're going to cry at that moment, you're going to laugh at that moment. And they know how the populace works, right? And that's their craft and that's their understanding, because they are appealing to quite a broad audience. So our work has a lot to do with appealing to a broader audience. So when you're appealing to a broader audience, damn, it's not easy, because you can't have 50% of the people like it and 50% of the people don't like it. Then you've not done your job. You need like 100% of the people to like it. So, it's not easy, but it teaches you every day to learn more about the human emotion, right? As soon as you learn more about the human emotion, we all feel a certain thing. And we all have more that we are familiar with than we are not. So you need to tap into that. And that's the stuff great creatives do when they come up with ideas. They tap into that mass populace understanding of something.
Yeah, that humanity is so important, because that's what we'll all, at the end of the day, relate to. And now coming back to that thing of humanity and connection, how did you guys meet?
How did we meet?
I saw the stuck the first day. I was like, yo, who's this dude?
It wasn't between the two of us. There is a third partner in this little trifecta, and it's David Cohen. And he actually employed me.
Sure.
Yeah, he said to Nate, listen, I think I've got a guy, he's going to take over FMB. He's from overseas, he's South African, he's traveled.
I met you in Cape Town, I remember the first time.
The design industry.
Yeah.
The Rolls Bar. But I think it was a match made in heaven for all three of us. It's been a great journey. I think, Nate, you go back to this, like this rebellious nature. You go back to this resilience that keeps you going. I have to say, like, I sum that in this idea of unconventional spirit. Like, it is who you are, and I think you've transferred that into the business. So when you talk about, like, sometimes what wakes you up, what drives you, I saw a great saying the other day, like the essence of a great culture is when you're excited on a Sunday evening. Such a powerful statement. So I do think, Nate he's always had that unconventional spirit about him. So which I think kind of wraps up all the rebellious, all those things that he's gone through in his journey, and he's transferred that into a business. So when you can capture that DNA, and then you can tune, it's like building a brand. Like, you've built a brand here where you can transfer a human insight into attracting the same people who have the same unconventional spirits, and you put them all into a business, and you frame it and you brand it and you call it Grid, and here's your offering. That effectively what Grid is today. And I think, again, like, none of us will, like Apple had that great manifesto about just bringing all the misfits together, and that's what our business is. Like, if you go back, if you start scratching the surface on who the people are that we've employed, they're architects, they're sound engineers, they're concierge service, they're designers, then they're art directors, then they're failed designers, and then they're and it's just about people sometimes feel the need to belong in order to succeed as well.
I'm very curious, because we've got two sides of the coin here. So, Ad, do you feel like you understood this philosophy before you joined?
Yeah.
Or do you feel like, okay, I feel like you answered, because I was going to ask Nate if you saw that in Ad before.
I tell you, I didn't know I needed it. I didn't know I just felt it. So I think it's a like-mindedness. And then when, over time, when Nate started to surround himself with other people that he believed in, other people he trusted in, other people he said, hold on, we can build this beyond what a traditional agency is, and we can create a philosophy of make it mean something. And then when he pegged it, all of a sudden you had a North Star for which it's like a lighthouse, when the seas are rough and when everything goes right and wrong, you still have this lighthouse that says that's where we're going. And for us, And I think it was our philosophy that got us through COVID. And that's why we thrived in COVID and didn't necessarily have to survive. And that was for me where the business really, the catalyst for exponential growth and success was during and post-COVID. Sure. And it was the philosophy that bonded a leadership team in which we very quickly deciphered what are the three things we're going to focus on: our people, our offering, and our clients. And that's what we built that's what we built our journey through COVID around. And through that, you're going to lose and you're going to gain. But the end result of gaining so much was again around that spirit of unconventionality there, where they were just, there's no rules, there's no playing field. So how do you, but then because there's a like-mindedness in the spirit of who we are, you all play within the same playing field.
Sure. That's a phenomenal answer. And it's crazy because it kind of goes back to what we were talking about, how you have to go through these lows in order to test these philosophies. That's the thing that gives it credence. That's what the thing that gives the achievement meaning, is that test that you go through when things are difficult. And that's what I think was the flip side of COVID. When you think of COVID, a lot of people think of it being a terrible, difficult experience. But there's also a lot of people that came out from the other side so much better, and that it was a reset and was a test to see who was resilient enough to get through. Yeah. And in order to be resilient, you have to have a why. You have to have a meaning and a purpose, because that's the only thing that's going to drive that through. So having said that, is there a challenge now that you're currently dealing with the grid? And can you tell us more about what that looks like and how you're getting through it?
Yeah, funny you say that, and we're talking about the word reset. We enter Ad Focus every year, and Ad Focus is the financials mails, we won it twice in a row, Agency of the Year, mid-side agency. So this theme this year is called Reset Creativity. So it's quite interesting that we landed unconventionally on this word. But the word reset for us, because I had to ponder a lot, we had a discussion to work out, guys, when they say reset creativity, what do they mean by that? And I had to go in deep search again to go, what is the sincere way of looking at this? And the sincere way for me is you got to work out how creative is pitching up to understand what is your reset button, right? So breakthrough creative, great storytelling, and the craft is the so-called given fundamentals in terms of if you want to play in this game, right? The idea of where you're reaching people, right, today is another big factor in, you can have breakthrough creative, but you're not reaching people, they're not seeing your stuff, right? So we will always be about breakthrough creative. We will always be about sound understanding of what the human insight is. We'll come up with ideas that are refreshed and amazing. But the idea of reaching the right audiences in the right places is where we need to reset our business. So we've created, Adam will go more into detail of some of the structures we're doing in order for us to do that, because Grid didn't have a real big digital offering, although digital has always been part of who we are and what we are, but we've been purposeful in terms of actually getting someone who understands that world to connect to our world. So we've always done that. Grid has always done 3 or 4 things ahead, and kind of not by any alien thing, but almost complementary to what we do, bring in certain things that plug in and play in terms of our relevance, right? So this thing called digital is, when I can reach you, when I know you wake up at a certain time, you're looking at stories, I know that you're going to go there, you're going to go there, you're going to go there. I can measure your mood in a day. So creativity is becoming a bit about data. Creativity is becoming about understanding where people pitch up. How relevant is your work in those mediums? We always said, this understanding of the populace and feeding them what they need at specific times and measuring it will make our brands loved, right? So our job now is to own that virtuous cycle in terms of creativity. So our reset is the virtual is that the reset is for us to go, How are we stretching our creative in this very distracted world?
The context has shifted so much post-COVID. So I remember before COVID, when we first started our agency, we would go and pitch to people what we did. And we digital agencies, that's where we functioned. And I remember no one would understand what it is that we're talking about. Why are you wasting my time? And then COVID happened and it completely switched.
Because everyone was on digital.
Everyone was forced to go.
You're forced to sit on Teams. You're forced to, like, some of you call us OGs, and some of our OGs are prone to not trying to be very technologically, ahead of things. But we all had to get used to it because that's the only way you had to communicate. But I mean, that's the same thing, in the creative industry today. The fundamentals of great creative will not change. How it pitches up and how it's relevant to those mediums will change.
Yeah. And that's why it's so important that we have these kind of discussions, because there's a merging of worlds here. There's a merging between the person who grew up with the phone since he was 10 years old and used it throughout his development versus someone who's had years and years of experience in the industry that understands the fundamentals and the wisdom of how to communicate messages and make people feel something on a broad basis. And I think when you combine those two things together, you get a very powerful combination, because we spoke a little bit earlier about, that feeling and how a lot of feeling comes from the subconscious mind, crunching numbers in the back of your mind. The great thing about data is it gives you that context. It gives you context in terms of how people are engaging, how long they're spending on a screen, what time are they using their phone. It helps us gain a little bit more understanding. And what I think is so exciting is that when you look at knowledge and you look at understanding, it always is expanding. So I'm so excited to see where the next level is. And I'm so excited to be a part of this conversation with Grid specifically because you guys are at the forefront of expanding that knowledge. So moving on to that, right? So there's been a reset. And in order to survive during resets, you have to adapt, you have to evolve. So can you tell me a little bit more? I think this is more directed to Adam. How is Grid evolving over the next coming months in order to adapt to this reset?
It's like you said, what's our biggest challenge? And I think our biggest challenge, also our biggest opportunity, is that the world today is everyone's challenge. Like, it's really tough out there. Like, you've got businesses that, like, if you're not open to change and adapting, you're going to be left behind. If and then you've got people also dealing with emotional and mental health challenges and well-being. So, you go back to that comment around the digital age where you've got two people here that they probably had their first cell phones at 22, 24 years old. Think of when you got your first phone. You're probably born with your first phone, in your hand. My kids are like, they cannot understand this idea that you live in a world without an iPhone and an iPad. And if you fast forward for leaders that are, been in the industry for 20, 30 years, like, we've had to adapt more than the younger generation has had to adapt. So in our business, the world is transforming, our clients' business is transforming. So we've got to work out, how do we own more of the value chain around the idea of building brands and giving brands meaning? And that must translate into value and impact for our clients. Like, that is the bottom line. To Nate's point, we build meaning for the populace. And then we help our clients connect with an audience, connect with a specific segment, resonate, and it converts into a sales or some kind of, brand love and that kind of thing. So where we've evolved as a business, we've also, over the years, we've been incubating certain things. So we've been incubating the idea of brands playing in culture, which manifests today in 608. We've tell our clients to show up as a digital first brand. And now we've also now got to show up as a digital first agency. So if we're not thinking digital first, we're going to be left behind. Then if you go back into storytelling in spaces, go back into our history and our DNA, probably Grid's second biggest project, even before my time, was Slow Lounge. Today, Slow Lounge is, at the time, it was one of FNB's biggest switching propositions in terms of its banking offering to customers, and was hugely successful. And so you go think of Slow Lounge, you think of the Marble Group, you think of Marble St. Zoo Pantry, you think of the Spur rebrand, store design. We're currently working on, a few other big blue chip corporate brands, including Woolies, that are repositioning the W cafes to be of a restaurant and a destination. And they all these brands are fighting for a share of market, share of wallet. And I think the retail space is completely saturated. So if you go back and then you elevate that into the idea of the luxurious marble circus, where it's a combination of entertainment, brand, property, platform thinking, digital, social engagement, influence engagement, music, experiences, all of that, just when you can start pulling that all together, I think then we've also evolved as a business where we got to start thinking of ourselves and saying, okay, can't wait for our clients to give us briefs and opportunities. What are the properties we're going to build and share with the world? And then we attract the right, brand collaborators that really get the sense of meaning and the understanding of playing in culture and saying, listen, that is an opportunity where I'm not seen as a sponsor. I can integrate my brand's meaning and my philosophy and bring it to life through a property that creative minds have built and taken to the market.
So we've spoken a lot about digital, and like our philosophy is connecting Africa to the digital economy and the world to Africa. And I think that's where we connected a lot, was that philosophy of uplifting Africa as a continent, putting South Africa in a global playing field. And if you look at the work that Grid does, through the quality of the work, through the way it resonates with people, it's operating at an international standard. How is Grid going to further that vision or mission of uplifting Africa and South Africa in the global space going forward?
Again, so first and foremost, right, when we don't look at just how we refresh some of Africa's most iconic brands. I mean, MTN is the most iconic brand on the continent, right? FNB, we've just rebranded that. When we look at those brands, firstly, we don't look at them as just African. We look at them as being benchmark, right? So, if we look at the brands around the world in terms of the banking category, FNB surpasses almost all of them. They were voted as the most innovative bank. Now, to be part of that, we don't just have a ceiling and go, we're going to be the best in Africa. We're going to be the best in the world, right? And we want to take all our clients and all our brands, because when you see the Springboks playing in Australia, or you see them playing in Argentina or the UK, our brands are on the field there, and we are super proud of them, because they are pitching up around the world looking like world-class brands, right? So I remember at one stage, Adam was even telling me, there were 6 of our brands when the Springbok was playing. We had Qatar, we had Brand South Africa, we had a Spur, we had MTN, we had FNB, right? But they were all brands that were running on the field, or on the field and things like that. So to me, that is enough pride to go, there's our winning team, there's our winning brands on the world stage, and got global dominance, right? So that shows all our other brands in the country that there is, wow, that is some serious pride. We don't pitch up looking like a third world country, in terms of how our brands move, how they kind of, play in culture. All those things are basically, when we look at it, we go, that's why these brands are so loved, because they're not just about this little thing. They're about the entire ecosystems. And if you can curate that ecosystem, right, which we really want to do. And when you talk about resetting and owning the future for us is that full value chain. When a customer goes, I can't say this brand is not touching me there or there, but wherever it does, I feel a sense of they get me.
You know what I love about what you're saying is like it comes back to that thing of going through adversity in order to test the mantra, in order to overcome. And what I love about South Africa, where we're at right now, is we are no stranger to adversity. We are no stranger to difficult situations. Yeah. And what I love about what's being said here is that all it takes is for leaders to take on that current situation and push through it and find ways to overcome it. And on the other side of that cloud, there is sunlight waiting to shine. And I think that's what's really special about what we've spoken about here, because that's the way that we operate. And to hear the same message being spoken by guys who are in the industry, doing the things that you're doing, having 6 brands on a world global stage on our TVs, which we watched last weekend, like that affirmation or reaffirmation is so valuable to someone like me. And I hope it's also valuable to someone who's listening to this right now, who's going through those adversities or those struggles that we're talking about now, because jump on the bandwagon, guys. Like, get a part of this, because the train is leaving the station and it's going places.
Yeah, I mean, again, just to see the sense of, all our, from technology to what we are as a nation, and all those things coming together in like one match sometime at the rugby, right? If you look at the culminations of all those things, like that is the most cutting edge you ever see in the world. I've never seen a match like that in Twickenham or in Wellington or whatever. It's like the people, the attitude, the brands, the case. It's like we belong to such a dynamic country, waiting to unearth everything, right? So to me, being part of creation or being part of uplifting some of those iconic brands on this continent or in our country, it says that we have the willpower, and we've got it inside of us. As you said, where does it come from? I think watching the Springboks play and all of that says to us we have it inside of us.
Yeah, I think that fuels it. But I do think we all come from, like every person, most people at Grit, I think there's a sense of hardship that most of us have been through, including Nathan, myself, and like we've all, no one's given us anything, and we spoke about in the last one. You've just back yourself, believe in yourself, find other like-minded people, find a philosophy, say that's my mantra, that's my North Star. Fuck, man, go for it then. Band together and go for it. And if you think of the Springboks, like we won 95, pulled us together in an era of democracy. Then we banded together, and then we went through our ups and downs. And then we won at 2007 or 8 again when we won again. And was it potluck? And then in 2016 we hit the all-time low. We got beaten 57-0 by the New Zealand team. And then but we always believed in rugby, and we'd have a good Saturday or a really bad weekend when we lost. And if you fast forward to today, to Nate's point, I think probably there's a team behind Rassie and Sia that they will both acknowledge. But what they did both do was, in Rassie, remember when he named Sia as the coach, as the captain, and he ran out there against, I think it was against, not Wales, when he ran out at Ellis Park. And we were down 27-9 at halftime, and we won 39-41. And again, Rassie and Sia banded together, and they said, we got to build this thing together. And they had the right people around them, and they've constantly evolved. And they also got this idea of unconventional spirit. Dwayne Vermeulen, last year, number 8th man, nice, standing on the sidelines, part of the coaching team. He's taken an All Black, put him in the coaching team. He's taken an Irish fitness coach and put him in his team. So I think the thing for me is you've got to think out the box. You've got to constantly be thinking out of the box. So our level of what is the word that to keep us alive.
When you said that unconventional wisdom, right?
Yeah.
There's so much credence in that. If we had to sum up this entire thing we were talking about today, even you're talking about that what he did, Rassie done with the so-called, with the box, is unconventional wisdom. The understanding of him leapfrogging in terms of trying to spearhead that the box into a new era. Everything he's done has been unconventional, right? But that wisdom of unconventionality, as Adam said to her, is kind of something that actually epitomizes us in a way. You know, we kind of create our own pathway, but it's unconventional, but it's got a lot of understanding of good things that come with it because we've learned so much, right? So it's not like chaos. It's like, hey, you know, we've projected this. Get some crazy ways to getting there, but we projected it. And there is planning, there is structure, right? It's invisible, but it comes from a place of, you know, where there is an amazing scars and battle that we went through to get to this place. But I like what Adam said about the unconventional wisdom. If I had to sum it up in terms of what keeps us together.
And I think as you're speaking, I'm just thinking about that thing in the beginning, you know, being raised by a single mom. Like, it's an unconventional family.
Completely.
It's an unconventional circumstance.
Yeah.
Circumstance,
Like,
that's
and
it.
then you've got to say, because it's so easy to go back and say, fuck, I'm hard done by. Like, I know my friend down the road,
Yeah,
his
it's not
parents are
normal.
wealthy, parents are together. And then you're like, but no, like, you're either going to buck up and say, well, this is my journey and I'm going to push through and I'm going to back myself. I always say that. And I'm going to move forward and I believe in it and I want to do it. Like, you can sit in your ass and worry and be a victim, or you can get up and say, I'm just going to do it now.
But I mean, like, you know, the audience out there today, you know, it's easier said now in terms of talking about success stories, but going back to where a lot of the people are at, you know, and the conversation of the inner dialogue that they have as to they want to make it, right? And I think naturally South Africans have got this inherent nature. You know, we've got some of the best content creators in the world. You know, people are trying to do things by themselves, right? And in a very unconventional way. It's within the grasp of how we are as South Africans.
It's the limitations. You're
That
forced
allow-
to do it
we-
differently.
Completely, right? So COVID forced us, but I think inherently South Africans have that. You know, we had that winning formula. We get a bit complacent, right? And we kind of relegated back sometime to either our past or race or circumstances. But all those things should be things that enable you to move forward.
Yeah, it's the adversity.
Yeah.
We're an unconventional nation.
But that's
And that's
what
our
I like to.
secret
I'd like
spice.
to, you know, that to me, you know, the unconventional wisdom to me is a beautiful theme for this podcast in terms of ways of going forward, because it got so much of so-called meat in it, because we are an unconventional nation trying to navigate our way through success.
Amazing, phenomenal. What is the last book that you read that inspired you?
So the last book I read, the Diary of a CEO, right? I mean, the funny thing about that book, right, is that I normally try to go to a book and go, I'm going to finish this book in 3 days. It took me like maybe a month and a bit to finish that book, right? It's only almost because I kind of read the one thing and I went back to it again, and like it never landed. So I was like, keep on going back, but I really loved it, you know. And funny enough, I still now have pages I go back to.
Only because he's never been a CEO. He's been the unconventional CEO.
Yeah, definitely
So he's
been a
never
CEO.
going to get the convention.
Never. I'm definitely not a CEO.
So what would you say is the biggest takeaway that you took from it?
I mean, the funny thing, you talk about unconventional wisdom. You know, I've taken the understanding from that book that, you know, you kind of learn as you go, and you're never too late to learn. And even that feels a bit cliched. It's like, if you're willing to keep on learning, you know, and self-correcting, you know, you become a great leader.
For sure. If you weren't in branding, what would you be doing?
I would have been a painter.
A painter. Okay.
Well, I mean, I kind of a bit, like, I would have definitely did something like unconventional.
Okay. I feel like I know the answer to
shit.
this, but I'm going to ask it anyways. Coffee or whiskey? What do you feel like sparks more creativity within you?
Definitely whiskey.
That was my guess. All right. And if you could have dinner with any global icon in the world, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
To me, I'd really like to have dinner with Obama, right? And I don't, you know, like, and I went and looked at his speeches, right? I mean, that's like one of the statesmen in my era. I mean, there was in other areas there were, you know, Martin Luther King, but he was never part of my era. So, you know, I heard Obama speak, and I was watching the TV, and I was like, who the fuck is that? You know, like, it's just that it's the charisma, it's the human insight, it's the humanity, it's like the voice, it's a proper orator. So, you know, now I know that he brings out a music playlist once a year, and I'm always looking forward to that list, because, you know, and it is quite unconventional too. He goes from rock, he goes from rock to jazz to, you know, totally unconventional. But to me, I'd like to pick that man's brain.
Sure. Most prized tattoo and the story behind it.
So there's this one here, which is like my daughter's name in Hindi, and I did it in India, and it was quite interesting. And I saw this guru, and I had to write her name when she was born, and he gave me a whole story on her, and then he wrote her name in Hindi for me.
Sure.
So that's tomorrow autumn.
What's one thing that most people wouldn't know about you?
Sure. You know, I ask people that question all the time. What's the one thing someone does not know about you? Damn, you know, like, it was easy before, but now it's become a bit more difficult because lots of people kind of know a lot about you.
Too much.
Too much. I pray in the morning.
Yeah.
Like, I genuinely give thanks. Like, a lot of people don't know that, but, you know, I don't see that side of me. And I'm quite spiritual, in the sense that I believe that all these things are for a reason. So there's a genuine gratitude towards a lot of things.
Abundance starts with being grateful with what you have.
Yeah.
Sure. Nathan Reddy, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for watching this latest episode of the C.Cast. If you enjoyed it, please like, share, and subscribe. We're trying to achieve a huge mission, and we need you to invest in it. The best way to do that is by liking, sharing, and subscribing, and leaving a comment down below. By doing that, you help the algorithm understand that we are offering content that is valuable, and it will reach more people. There might also be someone out there that just wants to learn a lesson, or who might be able to take something away from the podcast. Share it with them. And lastly, if you would like to be more involved in the community, if you want access to opportunities, knowledge from our experience in the digital marketing space, or to connect with other people who are like-minded in uplifting the continent, starting businesses, and using tech and creativity to make them successful, join the WhatsApp group by scanning the QR code, and we'll chat with you there. Until then, we're cooking it up.
Making that raw sushi.
Let's go. Keeping it raw. Pause.
I'm so excited about my music every time I put it out. People are more focused on numbers than they are on creativity. I went through a lot of bullying when I was young. A lot of kids used to bully me for my eyes and how I look. I just don't understand how I never had any of this traction happen. And my mom would say, yo, the fact that they're talking about it, you onto something.
Collaborations with Disney Plus, Cartoon on, over 10 million streams on all music platforms.
A lot of people just put out songs without really taking time into creating the music. And then it started getting a whole lot of numbers. And
hitting over 1 million streams on Spotify and YouTube views.
if you enjoy faith, you have nothing to lose.